Okay, I'm going to touch on three places fairly quickly. This is Young's literal translation of our gospel reading for today. And out of his fullness did we all receive, and grace over against grace, sometimes translated grace upon grace. For the law through Moses was given, the grace and the truth through Jesus Christ did come. Now, we don't have to get into the intricacies of the argument about this, grace versus works. But what we've done is we've finished up Acts. Acts does not end with the martyrdom of Paul. It ends before that. It just ends. So now we're going to do highlights from some of Paul's epistles. This is from Romans. And in this, Paul makes the case that God presented him as the atoning sacrifice through faith in his blood, meaning Jesus, in order to demonstrate his righteousness, because in his forbearance he had passed over the sins committed beforehand. He did this to demonstrate his righteousness at the present time, so as to be just and to justify the one who has faith in Jesus. Where then is boasting? It is excluded. On what principle? Of that of works? No, but on that of faith. For we maintain that a man is justified by faith apart from works of the law. This doesn't mean works in general. This means you can't save yourself, as the Pharisees thought they could, merely by being sticklers for the letter of the Mosaic law, the law given to the Jews by Moses. Jesus comes and he fulfills that law, but Jesus is grace upon grace, grace over against grace. We are saved by grace through faith, but as St. Paul says elsewhere, faith works through love. So we can't simply say we have faith in Jesus and therefore we're saved. We have to work that out in fear and trembling, as Paul says elsewhere, through love of God and of one another. And in addition to that, there is no room for boasting. We cannot boast and say, I've been saved. I'm in the club. It's a free gift. It's like saying, I'm alive. All those other people in that cemetery, they're dead. I'm alive, man. I'm pretty cool. Well, guess what? Hot shot. You may be dead tomorrow. It's by the grace of God that we receive everything that we have. Having said that, I want to point out something here that's in Hosea, and then give you a historical illustration of it. This is Ezra talking to the people about rebuilding the temple, and he's talking about the treasury that they're going to put in the temple, the treasures, the beautiful things that we see, for instance, in a beautiful Catholic church. Ezra says, then I said to them, you are holy to the Lord, just as these vessels are holy. The silver and the gold are a voluntary offering to the Lord, the God of your fathers. The silver and gold are a gift, a voluntary offering to God. And grace that God gives us is a gift. We don't earn grace. That's what grace means, freely given. And we respond in kind. We freely give back worship to God. But notice what he says again, and then I'm going to show you how this works itself out. You are holy to the Lord, just as these vessels are holy. Now, in Catholic churches, we used to have a tradition where the Catholic churches were beautiful, not so much anymore. But the idea is not that we're taking money away from people who deserve it, but that the beauty of the church should represent the beauty of God and the seriousness of our devotion towards him, and it should enlighten and enliven the mind to worship. Therefore, that makes me think of St. Lawrence and the treasures of the church. Okay? Oh, this is by, of all people, Brandon Vogt, as he says it. I know Brandon. Anyway, he talks about how in the year 258, the Roman Emperor Valerian started persecuting Christians. Valerian, on August 6th, 258, Valerian captured Pope Sixtus while he celebrated the liturgy and had him beheaded. Afterwards, he set his sights on the Pope's young protege, Lawrence. Before killing him, the emperor demanded the archdeacon turn over all the riches of the church. He gave Lawrence 3 days to round it up. Now, you might know this story. Lawrence doesn't gather up all of the vessels and the gold and the silver and the works of art and the beauty. He gathers the poor, the homeless, the sick, the desperate, and presents them to the emperor. He says, these are the true treasures of the church. The church is truly rich, far, far richer than the emperor. He gestures back to the door. Streaming in behind him poured crowds of poor, crippled, blind, and suffering people. These poor, crippled, blind, and suffering people are the true treasures of the church. And he's echoing Hosea there. Remember, I'm sorry, is that Hosea? No, that was Ezra. Man, have I been saying Hosea this whole time? Ezra. Ezra says to the people who are bringing the holy treasures back to rebuild the temple after their exile, you, he says to the people, are holy to the Lord, just as these vessels are holy. And that's more important. The true treasures of the church are the people in the church, which is why it is such a crisis and a shame when we deliberately behave like jerks. We are the true treasures of the church, even insofar as we are poor, crippled, suffering, homeless, desperate. The treasures of the church are the people saved by God, saved by grace, through faith, faith working through love. We can't boast about this. We're not in a special club. That's what Paul is saying in his epistle to the Romans. And remember, we're reading highlights from epistles now that we finished the book of Acts. Grace upon grace. Grace upon grace. And as Paul says elsewhere, where sin abounded, grace does all the more abound. Anyway, it's just a little theology there, and the theology comes from Scripture. It's not just pulled out of thin air. At least it shouldn't be.